All right, good morning, and thank you for joining. My name is Andy White. I will be your host this morning as we continue the Epygi 2020 Summer Tech Series. And this morning, we're going to be looking at system security and recommended practices. I will have everybody muted during the duration of the presentation. Let me go ahead and take care of that. Okay, so the threat is real within the industry. It's not a lot of hype. So it needs to be taken serious, just like the coronavirus that we're all having to deal with, right? Today I'll be showing you some things not to scare you or intimidate you, but to give you a better understanding of some of the tactics that are used and what you can do to prevent it. All right, so today we're looking at the system security. We've had a couple previous webinars. We'll get those posted on our YouTube channel if we haven't done so already. And then we have one coming up in a couple weeks and on SIP trunking and troubleshooting. And then who knows, maybe we'll get a couple more in September. Okay, that's the recommended security recommended practices. The first thing I want to do is actually I'm going to divert from the slides here just momentarily. And I'm going to log into the QX200. Okay, this is my system that I have here, and it's currently, I'll show you how it's configured. So we're going to jump right into it. If we look at system status, we'll look at the network settings. You can see that the system has a WAN IP address. It's on a private network, the 192.168.1.185. That's a private IP coming from my AT&T router. All right. And if you take a look at the system events, you're going to see a lot of red. Okay. A couple days ago, I turned off the system, the SIP intrusion detection. I disabled it. I also opened up my system to port 5060, which is the SIP port. I opened that up to anybody. And so you can see that there's been just a continuous attack of external somebody trying to access the system. All right, and we're going to look at that and see what they're actually up to. Let's do this. I'm actually going to really jump into it. I'm going to do a packet capture. We can do that under diagnostics. There's a network capture option, and I'm going to capture all the data packets on the WAN side. Okay, we'll go ahead and start that trace, that packet capture, and we're going to let that run here just momentarily. And that way we can go back later and we can take a look and see what we've got in the packet capture and see what's coming at me, basically. All right, well, I don't think we need to run it for too long, but we'll just give it just one moment. All right, that's probably about long enough, maybe less than a minute. All right, we're going to stop it and we'll download the capture. Click the download capture, and it's going to download it to my downloads folder. I'm actually going to go ahead and just open it. It's opening with Wireshark. It's a real good tool. It's a free tool out there. If you haven't used it previously, you need to take a look at it. All right, so it is open, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. I'm going to remove that packet capture. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my firewall, and I'm going to go to this option here called SIP IDS. That's SIP Intrusion Detection System. And I'm going to turn that on. I disabled that a couple of days ago, Monday. So I'm going to turn that back on, and we're going to let that run during the course of our session, and we'll come back to it a little bit later. All right, so for now we'll go ahead and just log out, and let's go back to the presentation. All right, let's start the slides back. All right, we got about an hour session today. Maybe we won't need that long, I'm not sure, but I've allowed an hour. We'll look at the security introduction. We've got a few slides to look at. We'll look at a really good document on the support portal. And then we're going to log back in the system and look at some of the security options. Okay, I just picked up a few quotes out there across the internet. These are some actual comments. Didn't take me long to find a few. Comments like the following: the phone bill for, and I X'd out the county government is more than $23,000 higher this summer. Hospitals, 911 call centers, and other public safety agencies can be shut down by hackers using a denial of service attack. A single fraud event can cost VoIP providers between $5,000 and $50,000. Scammers hacked into the PBX and placed 4,390 long-distance calls in under an hour. Okay, these are real. Okay, and I've seen some of this activity firsthand. Not lately, which is good, which means we're making a lot of progress. But there was a time that I used to hear of it more often than not, and the reason for the calls and everything was very it's easily understood. Typically, it was more of a configuration type issue. Actually, it was in all cases, but that doesn't obviously help when you get a bill like that. So the purpose of the session today is to help you understand what's going on out there, what happens, and how you can prevent it. Okay, it's not that difficult. So what are some of the common security threats? There's a denial of service, where the offending party sends a constant stream of SIP messages to the IPPBX at a very high rate. Okay, so much so that the system is so busy and so occupied with responding to all these messages coming in, and yes, there is an obligation. It's trying to keep up. It doesn't know what a real call is and an outside call or whatever. So it's trying to keep up with all the messages coming in at it, and basically it doesn't have time to process a phone call of a local user. All right. We saw that here in the Dallas area just about a year ago. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. Another threat is that of just being able to make fraudulent phone calls. Calls are placed directly to the PBX and are allowed to be processed. Okay, the reason for that is maybe a call routing entry wasn't secured properly. So the system is very capable of tandeming phone calls. Another method that they can make phone calls is if they're able to register a SIP account to the IP PBX, just like like an IP phone, like a remote IP phone. If they're able to register it, it looks like a regular extension, a regular phone. They can make long distance calls that way. Firewall issues to allow VoIP calls to proceed without issues. Maybe somebody is able to access the system or firewall and open up some ports. And then lastly, maybe eavesdropping. This one's a little bit more difficult, but they would have to have access to the network somehow, and they would actually be able to capture the voice packets for playback. Some of the vulnerable access points, just the PBX login access screen, weak passwords and things like that. Weak IP phone registration credentials, unsecured entries in the call routing table, IP phone login access. That means somebody being able to log in to an IP phone and be able to see what its credentials were, or maybe an open or maybe a weak firewall that's configured. Okay. What about some of the security measures that we've taken? So Epygi considers security to be paramount. Okay, many years ago, over 10 years ago, we sat down and we realized that there were some legitimate threats out there. And yes, the things that we had seen, they were typically configuration errors. But then we took a different approach. We said, well, what can we do to help the user not encounter such configuration type issues? What can we do up front? How can we stop some of this? So we went through the entire system, and any vulnerable access points, anything like that we can think of to guard against some of these security threats. We made changes, okay, and the changes have paid off dividends, and they're that's then one of the values in the Epygi product is that we do provide a mature product, and we have introduced these security and enhancements, and it's been developed over years of implementing new things and things like that. That's why a lot of people actually buy the Epygi system, because they trust it, and they because of the security things that we've done, enhancements. They tend to gravitate towards the Epygi product. I've been told that many times over. All right, we've got a built-in firewall. We have a system security audit that shows any possible weak points. System event messages can be displayed for possible security concerns. You can even be alerted. You can receive emails about these events. Any new call routing entries that are added, they are secured by default. Actually, the entire system is secured by default, and as you begin to move forward and configure the system, you want to make sure that you're able to maintain that security, and that's part of the training process and documentation and things like that we have out there. All right, so strong system passwords are system generated, and weak passwords are not allowed by default. Okay, we've added the SIP intrusion detection system, okay, which automatically blocks attacks. We've got the secure RTP, SRTP, which encrypts the voice packets between two endpoints. And then we've got the TLS, which is the transport layer security, which encrypts the SIP messaging between the two endpoints. All right, we're going to what I want to do now is go to the support portal. And we're going to log in. If you don't have access yet, it's under support portal. If you don't have access, you need to do so. Go ahead and register. There's no obligation in doing so. You'll get you'll use your email address to log in. All right, when you log in, you could just easily just search on the word secure. It'll bring up some documents. The one I'm wanting to highlight is the second one from the bottom, which is preventing unauthorized access and calls on the QX IPPBXs. Okay, once you click on that document, you need to accept the terms of use and then click on it, the link to see the PDF document. I have the document opened, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it in here. We'll slide that and take a look at it. All right, preventing unauthorized access and calls on the QX IPPBXs. Okay, it's some of the things that it highlights. I like this document and for a number of reasons. Obviously, the way that it's written, it tells you how to how to prevent some of these attacks and things like that. But it also gives you some good insight on some features, things like that you can use, and tells you how to configure those. So it gives you some real good insight on those items. Some of the basics, just configuring the system password, preventing SIP attacks, SIP IDS, talks about the firewall, call routing. There's a lot of discussion there about the call routing, some of the ways that you can use to secure your call routing entries using authentication, which would be like a PIN code. There's filtering services, class of service. You have call alerts. So it's a real good document. So I do recommend that you come back and take a look at this. In all my training classes that I've done over the years, I always highlight this document. All right. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to go back to the system. We log in. When you log in, you get you can log in with the username admin. There's also a second user called local admin, which is disabled by default, but you can set some rules, and I'll show you that. We'll look at that actually right away. And it should go without saying, use a good strong password. Good strong alphanumeric special characters, a good strong password. And that was one of the enhancements that we made many years ago to allow special characters and things. All right. When you connect to the system, you're now connecting. You're using HTTPS and not just HTTP. It will default and connect to using the HTTPS secure login. All right, changing the system password, you just go to maintenance, user rights, and on this page you can change the admin password and also the local admin. The local admin is disabled by default. You can enable it, and then up here at the top under roles, you can set what level of activity, which pages or menus that they're allowed to have access to. All right, there's, let's look at when you go to configure your extensions, you sign the extensions. As you've seen in previous discussions, you have your extensions table. extension management page. You have your extension, and it's assigned to a phone instrument or an IP line. All right, and that's where you're going to configure the device or phone. So I can click on that IP line 1 to go there directly, or I can click on this interfaces. Click on IP lines. Okay, so you can see all the different IP lines, and this is where you configure the model, no, the manufacturer and model of the IP phone, the MAC address. Most of you are going to be familiar with that by now. If you click on the IP line 4, for example, it'll allow me to configure this. Let's see, this is extension 103. Let me go back here. Actually, I want to look at IP line 5, which is extension 104. I don't think that one's being used right now. And this is where you configure the phone model type, the MAC address, number, line appearance, which is the number of simultaneous calls. And then you've got the registration, username, and password. Okay, and in here we've got a default, which is like local extension 104. And then there's a password that's generated to go along with it. So one of the first things that you'll notice is if I try to enter a password like 1234, it tells me it's very weak. Okay, and if I try to save that password, it gives me a big red error saying that password does not meet the password complexity requirements. Okay, so there's a check in place to make sure that I'm using a good, strong password. I'm going to show you where that is here in a moment. All right, so you can, another option, you can generate by default, there's going to be a good, strong password in there anyway, but you can use one of our system generated passwords. You can see the passwords that are created are very complex. There's no rhyme or reason to them, just a random characters generated, alphanumeric, whatever. And you can choose any one of these passwords, and that would be the password that you're going to use. That password is not going to be guessed. Nobody's going to figure out what that, no matter how long that they run these algorithms, it's not going to be guessed at any time soon. All right, it's not going to happen. And you can, there's a display here. You can change, view it. That's something that was added, so you can actually view the password that's in there. Another item that we've recently added is the phone web credentials. So by default, when you go to the menu of these phones, you can log in to the phone's IP address and log into the phone just like we logged into the system, the QX200. But the phone also has an interface, and typically the password on those, it's something it's very commonly known. It's out there by default, something like admin, or depending on the manufacturer, or everybody knows what the phone default passwords are. Okay, changing that password has caused a problem over the years because the system uses that HTTP command, and sometimes it needs that login username password to generate push commands out to the phone using HTTP. So we've added an option here for you to be able to change that here and put in a password. Okay, so that was a real good enhancement. All right, so next we're going to look at is the under telephony. We'll look at the call routing. Call routing table. In a call routing table, I've got quite a few entries, some 933 for testing 911, got a 911 entry, an 8-star for sip.epygi.com. I've got a couple 2-digit, 3-digit extensions, 00 for the auto tenant, direct call to voicemail, direct call to intercom using 56 and the extension number. Got a couple DIDs listed. And down towards entry 11 and entry 12, these are outgoing call routing entries, dialing either 10 digits or 1 plus 10 digits. And when I dial those digits, I'm going to make an outbound call to the it's IP to PSTN, which is a SIP call, to the SIP trunk provider, which in this case is Flow Route. All right, and the main thing that I want to highlight is when this, based on the digits dialed, this will be the, I'm going to make, this is your destination where the call is going to be sent. Okay, there is a field over here called source type. It is probably the single most important entry in the entire system as far as security goes. Okay, there's no other entry or field in the system that could be more important than this particular field. So I want to explain it very thoroughly. All right, basically the source type is identifying where the call came from, where it originated from, who was it that dialed the digits that you're trying to process. Okay, who dialed 1 plus 10 digits? So it's going to take a look at the originator of the call. In this case, it's specifying that the originator, if you're going to use this call routing entry, you must be an extension within the PBX. Which extension? We didn't specify. It could be any extension. But when you make that call, if you're going to use this call routing entry, you must be a valid extension in the system. All right. Let's take a look at the entry, maybe entry number 12, and take a look at that field a little bit closer. We can modify the entry. Okay, here's the pattern. We dial 10 digits. We're going to prefix, so we're going to add a 1 in front of it. So 1 plus 10 digits will be sent IP to PSTN call. 1 plus 10 digits will be sent to the flow route. Okay, and now we look at the page called filter on source, modify caller ID page. So here's your source type, and it's specifying that the if you're going to use this entry, you must be have originated within the PBX. Which extension? We put a wildcard there. We don't care which extension it was. It is possible to I could have been very specific. Only extension 103 would be able to use the this entry, or you could put a something like that. Anything in the 100 range. I could put a range of digits. That information, you'll be able to find out more about it. Just go to the help page right here in the top right hand corner. All right, I'm also modifying the caller ID, which is I'm just deleting whatever caller ID is there. Delete 99 digits. That's going to empty out the caller ID buffer and replace it with our 10-digit Epygi phone number. And then you just finish out the entry. Okay, so that's the source type field. Okay, you can also see down here entry number 13, 011 star. That's an international call. I don't make a lot of international phone calls, so that entry is disabled. I just leave it disabled all the time. If I need to make a call, I'll go ahead and enable it. Okay, just an added measure, preventative measure there. All right, another thing about these patterns you notice that it's very specific. The user picked up the phone and they dialed 10 digits, or they dialed 1 plus 10 digits. I've got a dialing plan in place. Okay, it's very important. I think I see a lot of times I'll log into a system and somebody will have an entry that's just a wild card. Yes, that will work, um, but that opens it up for international dialing. That opens it up for the user can pick up the phone and make a misdialed call. Maybe they dialed 9 digits or something like that, and the call will be those digits will be sent to the SIP trunk, and of course they'll get an error message on that call. But it's best to um, define an actual dial plan. Don't just put a wild card in there. I see that used periodically, and yes, it will work, but or even a wild card at the end. So let's say if I had 10 digits with a wild cards at the end of the 10 digits, that's still, as many digits as you want. So get the users to, in the habit of dialing a certain, whether they dial with 10 digits or 1 plus that. You can accommodate any dial plan you want with this system. The call routing table is so powerful. You can accommodate whatever you want. Okay. The other thing is maybe with this international call, maybe I do want some users to be able to use it, or maybe restrict it. So a couple things you can do. Right now it's disabled, but you can enable the entry. You can leave it enabled all the time. You can there's an option down here. You can use the let's go to the next page. You can enable this AAA authentication required authentication required. You can enable that. And once you're finished, then you're going to go up here to the local AAA table, and you're going to enable you can enable some PIN codes. Okay, just let me just click on it real quick. So I can enable some PIN codes, the user can, so that when you dial this 011, you're prompted for a PIN code. And you can, have whatever PIN codes that you want. Obviously something a little bit more complex than 1111 or 2222, if those were for example. Okay, so you can prompt for a PIN code if you need that 011 enabled. You can set the source type. You can set it to be allowed by only certain extensions, certain users. You can, the option that I like to use is the class of service screening. So you can basically enable this call routing entry to just have class of service for just certain users that can use that particular entry. So there's a lot of ways of protecting entries on your, especially the international routes. Okay, so that not everybody can make an international call. There's also, let's say if you do enable it, you can also you can enable this option down here, this trace debug option. When you enable any of these options on the bottom left, you'll get a new menu, a new page as you go through the wizard. Okay, and one of these is the trace option. You can get a system can generate an event log so that it will notify you that somebody made an international call. That particular event can be sent to your email. Okay, so you can be notified of it. All right, that way if there's too many international calls going on, then you'll be notified of that. Okay, what else? Call routing, that's pretty much it. So there's a lot of things that you can do there to restrict your entries. Let's look at the in your setup. And we go to system security. There's a system security management page. And on this page, you'll see that it's been set to medium. That's the default setting. And that setting comes into play when you go to configure your passwords. So like a moment ago, I was trying to configure a password. I tried to enter like 1234, and it complained it didn't like it. So it's not allowing me to enter simple passwords. Okay, there may be situations or times that you want to have a simple password. Maybe you're in a lab environment and you're doing a test phone and you want to allow that. Then you can. You just need to come back here and change your security level to low, and then you can go back, change the password to 1234 if you'd like. Just remember to come back and change the setting to medium. This option also comes into play when you're running the security audit. Okay, so we go to maintenance, diagnostics, security diagnostics. You can start a security audit on the system. It goes through and it's completed already. It's run all of its checks. And then you can view the security report. I get pretty much a clean bill of health, so to speak. It tells you the security level set to medium, the firewall is good, no security flaws there. If there were any IP phones that had a weak password, that 1234 that you entered a little while ago, that would have shown up in this list. Okay, the call routing entries, there's no call routing entries that are flawed. So it's complaining the password for the admin is a little bit weak, so it's recommending that you change that, so it's highlighted in yellow. Let's say if we did go back and we make a change to this particular entry, 1 plus 10 digits. Let me just go ahead and open this up. All right, so let me remove this source type and set it to any, which makes it available basically to any outsider. Okay, so I've removed the source type on that particular call routing entry. If I go back and run the security audit again, it completes, show the report. So now it's highlighted entry number 11. The following call routing rule is unprotected, entry number 11. So it gives me a great big warning on that. Okay, so let me go back and I'm going to go ahead and change that entry 11. Do that now before I forget about it. And just change the source type to PBX only. Okay, it's important to understand why you need to do this. Okay, when the system receives a SIP call, and the SIP call can come from any place, anywhere. Somebody could send a SIP call, an invite to my PBX port 5060, so the public IP port 5060, and the system receives that invite, and it's going to receive it, and it's going to look for those digits that it's trying to contact. Okay, the first thing it's going to do is check extensions management. It's going to check the SIP address field, and it's going to try to find a matching pattern. And if it finds it, it's going to go ahead and ring that extension. Okay, so let's just check the. Let's say if we look at entry number 103, for example. We just go to the admin settings, SIP settings, and you can see this field is called a username or DID number. And in this field, you could put the actual DID number. Or if not, you're just going to have, by default, it's just going to have the extension number in there. Okay, so if somebody sends you an invite to 103 at your IP address, it's going to ring this particular extension. Okay, that's the first thing I've and I'll show you this a little bit later, but I've received many calls over the last couple of days, in the middle of the night, outsiders ringing my extensions. Okay, how does that happen? Well, all they're doing is just sending a 3-digit extension. It matches the pattern, and it rings that local extension. Okay, it's not a mystery here. And we'll show you how that happens and why and what they're actually doing. Okay, if there's no match for the against the extension, if it doesn't find a matching username, at that point, then it's going to check. If it gets to the bottom of the table, still doesn't find a match for the pattern that it received, then at that point it will go through and check the call routing table for a particular match. Okay, that's why if you've got your 1 plus 10 digits wide open, it will find that matching pattern. If they send you a call 1 plus 10 digits and this is not secured, it will tandem that call and go right out through the on your SIP trunk. Okay, let's go back to our firewall settings. Okay, in the firewall itself, you've got you have the low, medium, and high security. I don't recommend using the high security because then you have to specify not only what's allowed inbound, but you also need to specify what's allowed outbound. It makes it a little bit too complex. Medium is good enough, definitely. Okay, so it's going to block incoming traffic except what you specify inbound. All right, and then if we go to the advanced settings, there's a couple options in here that are enabled or disabled. One is ping stealth, and that's just whether or not the system is going to respond to a ping request on the WAN port. If that's enabled, it's not going to respond to a ping. If you have that turned off like it is now, it will respond to the ping. Second option is the full port scanner. So there are tools out there that can go through and run a scan of your IP address, and it will detect the device and all of its ports that are opened. One of those being port 5060, for example. So if it detects, the system detects somebody running a port scan on your system, it's not going to respond. So that's enabled by default. All right, we'll look at the filtering rules. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one. We'll look at is the management access. Okay, who's allowed to access the system and log into it, and from where? By default, it's this is the default setting, by the way. HTTPS is enabled, and it's allowed to be accessed by any IP address. Okay, you notice HTTP is not in there, so if you want HTTP access, you would need to add that. All right, we can make this a little bit more secure. I'll show you here in a moment. You can restrict, where you're going to allow people to log in from. Okay, and you can do that. Actually, let's look at the next option, which is called SIP access. We'll look at both of those at the same time here in a moment. So same thing with SIP, port 5060. We're allowing access from any IP. Okay, I changed this the other day. I normally have this a little bit more secured, but I changed it the other day. Instead of restricting who's allowed access to my SIP port, I opened it up and said any. And within an hour, I had people at my SIP messages coming at me within the hour. Okay, it happens that fast. Don't ask me how they know or where they get these IP addresses, but it happens that quick. Don't be surprised. Okay, it's a little unnerving. I get it, but how do you restrict it? So one of the things that you can do is go to IP groups, and then I can specify um, who's allowed. You can create a new group here. One of these could be management access, for example. Just, let's say you create a group name called, let me click the box here so we can type. Maybe I create a new group name called management access. I have one in here already called SIP access. But you can create your group, and then by clicking on that group, so for example, if I click on SIP access, you can specify which IP addresses I'm allowing SIP traffic to come from. Okay, so proxy.sip.epygi.com, that's for the eCall for our soft phone to work. I've got another one from FlowRoute, and I've got another one, the 216. All right, so you can limit. This is probably one of the best ways to limit what's coming at you is within the QX firewall. You can create a group of your friendly IPs, which would be your SIP trunk IPs. They'll send you a list when you sign up for their service. They're going to send you a list of all their friendly IPs. All right, so you can go back to your filtering rules with that in mind, and then you can edit your entry. Instead of allowing SIP access from any IP, I can now create have SIP access just from that group called management access. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that. Any changes to any of these entries and the filtering rules, it will always come up disabled. Any new, if you add an entry, it'll show disabled. Don't forget to enable the service, or else it's not going to do you any good. And the same thing I could do for the management access. I can say I'm only going to allow management access from my known spots where I'm going to be accessing the system, these systems from. Okay. So you've got the groups, so you can create that. You can also specify allowed IPs where you're only going to allow certain traffic from certain IPs out there. All right, let's take a look at SIP IDS. At the beginning of this session, I came in here and I enabled this option. It's called SIP intrusion detection system is what it is. And this SIP IDS is checked, and it runs even prior to the firewall. So a lot of people will tell me, yeah, I added the SIP trunk IPs, I added those in the allowed list and the filtering rules and the firewall, but no, you need to add entries. SIP IDS gets checked even before they get passed along to the firewall. Okay, so all the packets are checked. And this is what the mechanism that's at work that's blocking these IPs. It'll block them automatically. Okay, and it'll do that based on, there's several criteria. And one of the things that that you want to do is the SIP IDS exceptions down here at the bottom. You can click on that, and you want to add all your friendly IPs in there, including your local subnet where the phones are located. Okay, it doesn't discriminate whether the phone, whether the IP address is a local IP, whether it's a public IP or anything like that. If you have a phone that's maybe it has a bad username, password, and you're trying to configure it, and it doesn't match with the QX username and password, after 2 or 3 unsuccessful attempts, it's going to block the phone IP address. At that point, that phone will never work until you remove that IP address out of the blocked list. Okay, so it's easier just go ahead and first thing, just add your local subnet into the exceptions list here. You also want to add your SIP trunk, all their IPs, and any other sites that you might be contacting or having SIP messages sent to or from that you expect. Go ahead and add those IPs in here. Okay. So by doing so, it will not block anything that's in that exceptions list. Okay, let's take a look at what gets blocked. So if I go back to my filtering rules, and if I look at the blocked IP list, this list has been growing since January of this year. I deleted everything prior to January. And you can see all the IP addresses that have been blocked by the system. That is, ladies and gentlemen, that is a lot of IPs, okay? It's good to periodically just go through and delete a lot of these IPs. You can the system has to check this against this list each time, so it does consume some resources. And think about it, every single packet has to be checked against this entire list. You can go through and periodically, maybe delete the list, maybe not entirely, just delete, anything older than 6 months or something. Just go ahead and delete it. If it reoccurs, it'll get added right back in there, okay? But it's best to keep the list shorter if possible. Okay, also this is where you're going to go if you, let's say if you have a phone that you didn't add the local subnet into the exceptions list and it gets blocked. This is where you're going to go. You look for the phone IP address, look for any IPs in the local subnet, and remove those from the list. Okay, let's go down here towards the bottom. All right, looks like we've had a couple since we've been on the session here. We've added a couple IPs. There's 156, IP 156, 96, 117, 185, and also another one. Those two have been blocked since I enabled the SIP IDS. Okay, one at 908 and the other one at 913. Okay, let's go through and let's see why they got blocked. So if we go back to status, we look at our events, and you can see that the phone here, we added the there's a blocked IP event. It says that IP was added into the blocked IP list, no such line configured. So basically, and here was the other IP. It was added because user not found. So we got two different reasons for the system for blocking that IP address. Okay, we can see the obvious one at the 185 IP address. It was just continually trying to register with different IP phone usernames. So username 7711, 4340, and different passwords that go along with all of these. And it was just, and if you look at the rate at which these are coming in, okay, this was at 908 and 35 seconds, 04, it was just very, very high rate of messages just all coming in. So we blocked them. One was because of an invalid username, and the other one was because of an actual phone call that it was trying to make. All right, so the system took care of those IPs for us. If we go to maintenance, let's just look at, see if we can find one of those. If we look at the system logs, SIP registration, Okay, I'm just going to scroll through this. These are all, looks like my friendly. Um, let's go back a previous page. Let's go to page number 4. This was at 9:38, so this is probably okay. All right, that's fine. Let's go back to maybe page 1. 919. And I may or may not be able to find these, but so I'm getting so many other legitimate messages, but we did get a packet capture earlier, so maybe we've got those in there. Okay, so let me go back up. Let's look at the actual phone calls. So this is SIP registration. This other one is SIP user agent, which is an actual phone call. Oh yeah, we definitely have a lot of activity going on in the SIP user agent. Okay, this one maybe prior to getting blocked. Let's see. Okay, so here was a call that came from this IP address. They were dialing the digits 504, whatever it was, and the system responded with trying, and then it responded with a not found. Okay, because number one, there was no matching pattern for this number that they were dialing, and no call routing, no extension with that SIP username, no call routing entry that they were allowed to use. So the system responded with a not found. Okay, what its system is doing, one of the the SIP IDS, is if it detects 10 consecutive unsuccessful calls from the same IP address, then we're going to block that IP address. Okay, if were 10 consecutive calls without a successful call in between, then we're going to block the IP. All right, that actually that's to prevent a denial of service type attack. As I mentioned, that did happen here in the Dallas area, where several sites, including my own, was receiving so many calls at such a high rate that the system, that's the actual concern, not the fact that they're going to make any calls, because your call routing entries are secure and everything else. But we want to block those because we don't want to have to have the system responding to all those messages. So 10. So for that reason, it could even block your SIP trunk IP address. That's why you want to add your SIP trunk IP into the exceptions list. So for example, let's say if you had 10 DIDs that you're giving from your SIP trunk provider, and you're only using 9 of them, and the 10th one hasn't been assigned, you haven't added it in the call routing entry anywhere, and then somebody goes to use that DID, they make 10 calls to it in a row, it'll block your SIP trunk IP address. So you want to make sure you add that in there into the exceptions list, just to prevent any sort of problems like that. All right, so yeah, as a result, that was, like I said, over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. We recognized that, and we said, what can we do to prevent that? Well, if we get 10 unsuccessful calls, we block the IP address. So that was something that we added as a direct result of just realizing what's going on out there. Okay, and then you've got the registrations. If they fail, about 3 consecutive unsuccessful registration attempts, we're going to block that IP as well. Okay, let's go back and let's take a look at the packet capture that we had earlier to see see if there was any activity in there. If I go under telephony, VoIP calls. Okay, if you remember at the beginning of this discussion, I started this packet capture and we only ran it for about a minute. Okay, these were the number of calls that were coming in at me. You notice the IP, the 156, 156.97 IP address. Just curious, where is that? You can bring up a tool called or a website. Just go to whatismyip.com. One of the IPs that was coming at me was IP 185.47.12, 212.80.8. That was coming from Paris. Okay, just curious. Let's take a look at this one. 156.96.117.185. Let's see where that user is coming from. That's coming from California, so they're not all international hackers out there. And you can see they were dialing the digits, just 561, 46, all these, just trying to find some sort of matching pattern that would allow their call to proceed. Overnight, I did get, like I said, I had several calls come in where that rang my phone because all they were saying was a 3-digit extension, and that matched my SIP username, and it would ring the phone in the middle of the night. Okay, I turned the volume down because I knew it was going to happen. But needless to say, the threat is real. Let's go back and we'll wrap this up. We're going a little bit over our time this morning. Okay, so what can you do? Change the default admin login to a good, strong password. It should go without saying, all right? Update the system software. There's been numerous security updates within the system over the years that have been that we've added. So you definitely want to get this, make sure that your system is up to the latest software. Ensure that your entries in your call routing table are secured and restricted to be used by PBX originated callers only. Use good, strong passwords when configuring your IP phones. Change your login passwords for the GUI of your remote IP phones. If you have a remote extension and it's you don't want to just leave that phone out there accessible to anybody. You want to make sure you have a good, strong password on it. Encourage users to use strong passwords for accessing a voicemail. You can't originate a call through the voicemail system. I know a lot of PBX systems over the years, you can make calls through the voicemail. You can't with ours. But there are other options, things like call relay. If that is enabled or used, make sure you've got a good, strong password for if call relay is enabled. All right. You can restrict SIP traffic to only your friendly IP addresses. Okay, you could do that within the QX, the filtering rules, the management table, firewall tables there. You can do that. But another thing that that I didn't mention is these systems, they can stand out on be on a public IP address, and it has a firewall. You can do that. But if you've got quite a number of phones, you definitely want to put that system behind a good, strong firewall. Let the firewall do its job, not the firewall of the Q. You can have the QX firewall enabled as well, but have a good, strong firewall in front of the system. Let it do the job of what it does best, of blocking and filtering out the traffic, restricting SIP access to only your friendly IPs. Let put a good, strong firewall out there. Okay, you'll definitely lighten the load of the QX, so it doesn't have to deal with all these attackers, and and try to process calls and all the features and everything else that it's trying to keep track of. So definitely, I would recommend putting a good, strong firewall in front of the system. All right, so that's the system doesn't have to take care of all that. All right, you can have your service provider block international traffic. Okay, make sure that that's a good question to ask when you sign up for a SIP trunk. Do they allow international calls by default? If your customer's not using international calls, turn it off. By all means, turn it off. And does your service provider, will it shut down your account when there's a spike in long distance calling? Now, so ask the question, are they monitoring traffic? And then all of a sudden over the weekend, they see a huge run up in traffic. Shut down the shut it down, shut down the account, and give you a call. Let you know. It's a lot better that your account's shut down completely than if for some reason there was a compromise or a security breach, and then all this traffic and cost gets run up. So ask the questions from your provider. If they shut down the account, what do they do, or are they even monitoring the traffic? All right, they should be able to do that. There's no reason. It's in their best interest to do that. All right, small business, they're not going to be able to pay for $20,000, $30,000 phone bill. It's not going to happen. All right, use VPNs between offices if eavesdropping is a concern. Eavesdropping isn't it's not a high security risk. I don't think it takes a good bit of somebody have to be on the network, and but especially out on the internet, they'd have to have access to your access point to be able to do that, and that would not be very easy. But you can run VPN between your offices, so it's a little bit more secure. All right, that completes the session this morning, and we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. We will make this available. We'll get this out there and posted. So thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you on some other webinars. All right, and good luck to everyone. Stay safe, and best of luck to everybody. All right, I will open up here in a moment for some questions.